So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this amazing another keynote speech. And today we are hosting the CEO and Executive Director at the Wikimedia Foundation, Katherin Maher. So Katherin, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here today. I have attended a number of events virtually since this pandemic has begun. I will say I was really looking forward to using the virtual avatars, but I just really appreciate how you've continued to organize and pull this all together. So my name is Katherin Maher. I'm the CEO of the Wikimedia Foundation, and you may not have heard of the Wikimedia Foundation before, but you've probably heard of our biggest product, which is Wikipedia. In fact, you may have used it already today. Wikipedia is one of the most visited websites on the planet. It has about 1 billion users every month and is known really as the free encyclopedia that anyone can edit. But over the course of the last 19 years, I would argue that Wikipedia has become a lot more. It is a global movement for free knowledge. It is an incredibly popular and trusted resource. It reflects the cultures, communities, and knowledge of people all over the world, and it has become integrated into the backbone of many other consumer products and search experiences, voice assistants, and the like. Wikipedia really is everywhere you are, and sort of holds the knowledge that we as humanity have built together. And at this moment, in the midst of a global pandemic, we're really seeing firsthand how important Wikipedia is, or at least how important knowledge and information, and particularly high quality, good information is to our societal well-being. So I want to talk a little bit about what we have learned at Wikimedia from the pandemic about the value of good information, and I think the responsibility that we all share to improve knowledge for everyone. So at the Wikimedia Foundation, we have a vision that we speak about often, which is a world in which every single human can freely share in the sum of all knowledge. We believe that knowledge belongs to every human on the planet. That's why Wikipedia works the way it does. It's open for anyone to edit and open for anyone to revise and to share. Wikipedia is fully free. That means free as in beer, which means it has no cost to you, but also free as in libre. It can be reused and repurposed however you see fit. It comes from the tradition of open source software, free, libre, and open source. Every single article on Wikipedia is written by a volunteer contributor from people around the globe who share their knowledge and their time. Sometimes these are experts in their fields. They're people who have PhDs. They're people who work in some of the leading institutions on the planet in whatever subject matter they have. Sometimes these folks are retirees. They're school teachers. They're former engineers. Sometimes they're teenagers. They're 13-year-olds who should probably be doing their homework but are instead editing Wikipedia. Together, all of these millions of people around the globe over the course of nearly 20 years have collaborated, and in doing so, written more than 50 million articles in 300 languages, and collectively over time have made about more than 3 billion edits in order to create what Wikipedia is today. These folks are known as Wikipedians or sometimes Wikimedians, and they kind of together work to build this into the largest collection of free collaborative knowledge in all of human history. It's really quite remarkable when you think about it, all of these people who don't know each other coming together to create this thing that nobody ever thought would work, and yet somehow it does. On average, Wikipedia is edited about 350 times a minute, which is 350 times every single minute that we have the opportunity as people, as society, to evaluate what it is that we know or update what it is that we know. All of these contributions have to abide by a set of Wikipedia policies, which means that they have to be based on reliable sources, they have to integrate different perspectives, they have to seek to bring together the most comprehensive and neutral understanding of any given topic, from celebrity biographies to philosophical theories to the politicians of the day. This means that Wikipedians work hard, often on both the trivial matters, but also the most important matters, trying to find balance, trying to present to the world the highest quality information that they can, that can survive the scrutiny of all of those hundreds of millions of visitors. Wikipedians do all of this because they are, frankly, obsessed with high quality information. I'm sure you've seen the news over the course of the last couple of days. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about Facebook's recommendation engine and creating more division, societal division, which has tremendous relevance in this moment as we're trying to ensure that people stay together and form some sort of societal cohesion in order to protect the greater public health. And Twitter's efforts in the last couple of days to fact check the US President, Donald Trump. Why is it that these platforms have been struggling so much with the quality of information that they're presenting? And why is it that Wikipedia is different? Because as we go ahead and look at sort of the information presentation on Wikipedia over the course of the pandemic, what we see is really high quality information. What is it that makes Wikipedia not have these same hard problems? Well, I would argue that the answer is that we've been preparing for this moment in some ways for 20 years, and this makes us uniquely positioned to support the world through this information crisis that we're all going through. If you think about where Wikipedia comes from, in fact, the whole tradition of how it works is a constant improvement in terms of the way that it presents information, the policies that it uses to evaluate that information, and its entire job is really about sorting good information from bad. Every day, every hour, thousands of Wikipedians around the world are working to keep the world informed about the latest developments in this pandemic. This means that they're going through newly released medical research to make sure that our articles are as accurate as possible. They're updating infection and fatality numbers. They're creating data models around COVID-19 patterns in order to present them on the site. And they're translating medical information into more languages to make sure that information about the pandemic is more accessible. Today, articles about COVID-19 are in 175 languages. By comparison, some of the leading international organizations responding to the pandemic are able to make information available in more like dozens of languages. And so you can see how this platform, which has this community of translators and polyglots, really serves an essential function for making critical information available to the general public. Since the pandemic began, Wikipedia has had more than 54,000 editors around the globe work on articles related to the coronavirus. And there are now more than 5,200 articles in some way touching on the coronavirus on Wikipedia. If that number sounds like a lot, it's because it is. It's really remarkable, actually, for us to see how much the information has spread out and propagated throughout Wikipedia. So these articles, which started, say, with the article about the novel coronavirus, the main article, which is now about the SARS-CoV-2 virus, is just one of the many viruses, or one of the many articles touching on the topic of the coronavirus. Wikipedia now has articles about issues of economic recovery. It has articles about efforts to develop a vaccine, including an article that is very clear that there is no vaccine of yet, but fills an information void in order to provide that information to the public. Articles about the rise of xenophobia in relation to the coronavirus, articles about local municipal policies in every country in which these have been enacted. And what we've really seen is we've looked at the traffic data and the ways in which people are using this information is this fanning out of public interest in the virus itself. So starting with a really large surge in terms of articles coming to just what is a coronavirus, to really getting down to very local applications of information. How is this affecting my community? What do I need to know in order to be able to take care of myself and my families? How is this affecting my economy? Questions like that. And so it's into us, I think, it really sort of proves one of the sayings that we often have, which is that everything that happens in the world happens on Wikipedia. And that's why we now have more than 5,000 articles about this pandemic as it's been going on. The people who edit these articles are a diverse range of folks. As you can imagine, given the topic areas that these articles cover, they're not just all doctors, but I do want to talk a little bit about one particular group, which is Wiki Project Medicine, which is over 100 volunteer community members, many of whom are from the medical community, so medical doctors, researchers, scientists, and who work together to improve the quality of articles about medical content on Wikipedia. They are hyper vigilant, not just during this pandemic, but about information in general related to the quality of medical information. in order to ensure that they feel confident that the best quality information is getting to people who are searching for it, particularly for health, since it is just truly at the core one of the most important things that we all have. And other websites we've seen are now turning to Wikipedia for up-to-date quality information. It's not just the general public, although that traffic has been surging. In fact, there was a period in April and May in which it felt like every single week a new record was broken in terms of overall traffic, including a day in which I think it was nearly 750 million people visited Wikipedia. But it is other platforms too. So Google is using Wikipedia data to power their expanded knowledge panel about COVID-19. So if you've actually gone to Google since the pandemic started, you would see that they have a special sort of section, I guess, results. If you are searching for anything related to the coronavirus, that it has the latest breaking news and information, resources like the WHO and the CDC and the NHS, high quality access to information based on what language you're searching in. But they also have an extended panel that goes into country by country statistics that is a map, and they're actually relying on Wikipedia's country by country data to populate and illustrate that map of the pathogen spread and give updated numbers on confirmed cases, those who've recovered from the virus and those who died from its effects. I think this is really remarkable. It speaks to the fact that it's actually quite difficult to gather this data in a way that is quality and verified across all these different sources of information, all the different country health authorities that are reporting it out. And the advantage that Wikipedia has is that it actually has hundreds of thousands of people in all these different countries who speak these different languages, who are much closer to the source of information, which gives it a totally different sort of fidelity than one editor or two editors sitting in a room in Vienna or San Francisco or wherever that might be. Facebook and Microsoft have also been using Wikipedia data to help inform their users about the latest impacts of the pandemic. And we are pretty confident that there are many other organizations as well that have taken this information and propagated it into their sites and platforms. It's hard for us to know because we don't actually track how this information is used. And as I said at the very beginning, it's completely free for anyone to use, whether you are an individual or a large tech platform to do this. And I think Wikipedians have seen the way that this information is presented, and it gives them a special sense of responsibility, this role of summarizing facts from trusted resources like the World Health Organization or Johns Hopkins University in the United States to provide people with the information and the context they need to make informed decisions about how they participate in their societies and how they care for themselves. I think one of the other things that has made this such a remarkable response and such an unusual thing for Wikipedia to play this role in this pandemic is that it is constantly changing, but it's all doing so in the context of aggregated information. So when you go to seek information about what's the latest with the pandemic, it's quite tough often at times to put everything in context. What's going on with antibody tests? What's going on with testing in my country? How is this working? What is the nature of contact tracking and surveillance? All of these sort of terms that we've all become experts in since, I guess, earlier this year. And as you search for that information on the web, it's often hard to find it. You find maybe one article or another article, but it's hard to see that information in context or how it's evolved. Wikipedia puts it all there together, right in front of you. And I think that that's why it fills this really special sort of niche in that ecosystem. I mean, as you can imagine, following the newspaper headlines throughout the year, how our knowledge has changed over time. And in fact, an article came out, I think just today, on Slate, which is a publication based in the United States, talking about how Wikipedia would probably be a really interesting primary source for researchers who go back to look at the way that public information changed over the course of the pandemic, because every single edit has been saved since the pandemic began. In fact, every single edit to Wikipedia has been saved since Wikipedia began. So if you really wanted to, you could go back and find the first draft of history for any article that exists. I think that is this unique role that we play, is really just a reflection not of only what we know, but also how we came to know it, how our information has changed and evolved in the world. And I do want to just speak really quickly to the fact that it's not just this pandemic. It is not just the fact that it is this truly global thing that we are all going through. It is really also a question of what I think we're calling an infodemic. which is the crisis about what we don't know as well as what we do. You know, what made this pandemic particularly unusual, unlike, say, the Ebola outbreak of 5 years ago in West Africa, is that this virus is novel. It's literally a novel coronavirus. It's new. We didn't know anything about it. And we're all learning as we go along. We continue to have more questions than we have answers. And in this absence of information, what we have seen is a rise of misinformation across the internet as a whole, a rise of misinformation, which is in its own form a public health crisis. When we don't have the information that we need, fear, doubt, uncertainty, these are the things that creep in. And we've not seen this before in the context of public health. At least, certainly, no one in our lifetimes remembers a global pandemic. And I don't know of any similar global spread of misinformation that is perhaps quite so at risk to all of us as a society. Wikipedians have been dealing with this issue sort of in their own way. The volunteers who are prioritizing accuracy over speed, particularly when it comes to current events, to ensure that folks can have access to this trustworthy information. It makes it, I think, what makes Wikipedia also different from the news. Rather than trying to break the news, what they're actually trying to do is slow it down to get it right, to prioritize high quality information over potential misinformation. Certainly what we saw, I think the example very early on in all of this was, where does the virus come from? Was it a bat? Was it a pangolin? Wikipedia editors refuse to pass judgment on that. In fact, one of the things that Wikipedia says is we may never know, and that's okay. We'd rather be very clear about what we don't know than what it is that we might know, and speculate instead. And I think that there's a lot to learn from this experience at this moment in time, because this certainly isn't the only crisis that we're in around the globe. We're in the midst of a crisis of confidence in democracy, and we're seeing real challenges to political participation and civic participation in countries where there are decreasing access to freedom of information, the right to assemble and mobilize and participate in sort of the full open society type of way in which we would need to be able to preserve that democracy. We're also in the midst of an incredibly urgent climate crisis. It feels as though it was really old news, but it was just last year, actually only a few months ago, that the entire continent of Australia felt like it was on fire. One of the largest forest fires our planet has ever seen. Very similarly, we have the Amazon on fire in Brazil, and vast swaths of Indonesia where forests are burning. Yet global warming, while maybe not at the front of our newspaper pages at this very moment, is another issue in which disputes over data and scientific models about probable futures have led to paralysis and inaction, or again, that uncertainty and doubt, making it difficult for us as society to respond collectively in order to be able to protect ourselves. I think this rise in misinformation has really led to a lack of urgency and understanding about these paths forward. We don't feel like we can take action if we don't know what action to take. I think that, just as I go to close, from my perspective, it really puts our entire information ecosystem under a microscope, this moment that we're in, and forces us to ask really difficult questions about where it is that we're learning information, how it is that we're sharing it, how healthy and robust are our ways of getting information, both the media resources that we rely on, whether it's our newspapers or our broadcast journalism, but also the importance of the institutions that produce that information. The funding, for example, for organizations like the WHO or the various Centers for Disease Control around the world. What access do they have to the resources that they need to produce high quality information in the public interest? And what is each of our responsibility to safeguard this ecosystem and support it? I think these are really important questions for us to all ask. When misinformation becomes a matter of life and death, when false theories are promoting solutions that could provide fatal, it becomes all of our responsibility to come together and think about what good information should be and how and when we share it. As users, we can provide complexity and nuance over headlines that are really all about shock. As tech platforms like Wikipedia, we can create incentives to help encourage people to analyze what it is that they're reading and to share high quality information rather than just clickbait. Together, I think we all have a collective responsibility, a little bit like how we're all choosing to stay home. I'm coming to you today live, I guess, on a Zoom call, whereas normally I'd love to stand in front of a stage and get to meet you perhaps after the talk. But it's our shared responsibility to stay home in order to protect our societies, protect our neighbors, our families, our friends, and people around the world that we'll never actually meet. I think we have a similar shared responsibility to the information ecosystem because its health is essentially our health. So I want to say thank you so much for having me here, and I'm really looking forward to the questions and conversation now.
Okay, thank you very much, Katherin, for the amazing overview of what you are doing. And I can tell you that it's really amazing what all of you are basically doing. And I would like to ask you maybe like the basic question, but what is your definition of true, like a true news or a fake news? What are your definitions from your let's say big picture level?
Yeah, I think that the way that we look at information is there's obviously high quality news that on Wikipedia needs to come from what we call a reliable source. That is a source that's trusted in its field and usually has some form of editorial oversight, which means that it goes through some sort of editorial review, academic peer review, fact checking and the like. Then you've got on the other spectrum, misinformation and disinformation, and just simply bad information, information that's inaccurate or that is out of date. You have information voids where there isn't good information about a topic, and so bad information creeps in. Misinformation tends to be when folks are just misinformed about a topic. They don't necessarily mean to be actively sharing something harmful. And then there's disinformation, which is active manipulation of information to some sort of political or economic or power-oriented outcome. And so, at Wikipedia, we really look across the whole spectrum to say, well, what's just bad information? Like that information about that band is out of date. That drummer isn't in the band anymore. That's bad information. But then there's the really harmful disinformation, which is information that is deliberately meant to confuse or mislead the public.
And what is actually, from your experience, the percentage of the true news and fake news in the world?
Oh, well, I mean, I think most, that's an interesting question. I don't actually know how you would begin to quantify that, because fake news comes from really small sort of like content farms or individuals sharing memes and the like that isn't really news. It's just bad information, or as I said, disinformation. I don't know any media outlets that are deliberately putting out fake news. And so I guess I would differentiate between like news that is actually news, sort of the capital N, like it's produced by a newspaper or by a broadcast organization, and like news with a little n, which is just something you haven't heard before that's being shared, probably in a group chat with your relatives. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's usually where I get the worst of it.
Okay, and in terms, because as you mentioned, you are working with so many people with so many information. So how you personally, work with personal biases in different cultures? Because I believe that the meaning of the true and basically all the information in different cultures, because of the religion and different traditions, could be a little bit different. So how you are working personally with this?
Yeah, that is a really great question. So I think we start off from the basis of saying that the more people we have, the better the information is going to be. So because we do all have different backgrounds and cultures and experiences, if I'm writing about something from the perspective of the US, it's going to be completely different than when you're writing something, because we come from not different worlds, we're all from the same world, but we have different lived experiences, we have different histories, we were educated in different ways as children. When we get to the best truth is actually when you and I are able to understand our respective histories or our respective understandings of the world and create a new understanding together. So we start from the position that you need to have editors who reflect the world. You need to have people from India and Pakistan editing about India and Pakistan. You need to have people from Russia and Ukraine editing about Russia and Ukraine. You need to have people from Israel and from Palestine editing about Israel and Palestine, because we may actually have these really hard topics that it is that we need to navigate. I mean, I'm picking some of the conflicts that are sort of ancient and enduring conflicts in some ways, at least over the last 20 years. Ancient and enduring was a bit of a joke, but these are tensions and conflicts that have different understandings and different perspectives on these different sides or along a spectrum of interpretations. And when we understand them more fully, we're able to recognize one another more wholly as humans. And I think it actually lets us get to better solutions. I often talk about the fact that I don't think Wikipedia is the truth. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to recognize. To your point, my truth is just different. It's based on the fact that I'm a woman. It's based on the fact that I'm an American. It's based on the fact that I'm white. You know, all of these different things. My truth is going to be different than somebody else's truth about how I see the world. But when we all are able to have those conversations about our truths together, Wikipedia is able to include them and form a different understanding of what we can agree on. So it's not the truth, it's what we can agree on about how we see the world. Yeah, I could talk about that for hours and hours. I think it's one of the most fascinating things. But for me, it's just a call for greater inclusion, more participants. The more perspectives we have in the conversation, the more holistic an understanding we're going to have about our world.
Okay, and now some pre-final question, a little bit more personal. Or for what you are the most grateful in your life so far?
Whoa, the most grateful in my life so far. I think I would have to say I'm most grateful to my parents, because if it weren't for their love and care, I don't think I'd be able to be in this position that I'm in today. I think, you know, like many people, all of us have parents. Some of us have great relationships with them. Some of them have difficult relationships. Some of us have lost our parents, you know, and have different people who filled that role in our lives. I think anybody who's ever achieved something of note, or anybody who is comfortable and fortunate enough to live a life in which they are happy, had somebody in their life that cared for them when they were small. And so for me, I am most grateful to my parents for doing that and encouraging me to do what I wanted to do, to pursue dreams that seemed very silly, if not impossible at the time, for giving me a computer when I was a little kid, and then also giving me the hardware tools, the screwdrivers, to take it apart and make it stronger, faster, better, more powerful, so I could continue to explore that new thing, the internet. Yeah, to them, encouraging me to travel the world. It was the best thing they ever did.
Thank you. And last question, what would be some, let's say, golden message would you like to share with the, you know, with our visitors, with all people around the world? What is your golden message?
My golden message is that we all have a responsibility to one another. You know, I like to say that Wikipedia is a thing that we do together. It's the knowledge that we create, no matter what it is that we do in our lives, whether we're software engineers, whether we're entrepreneurs, whether we're, you know, cultural preservationists, whether we're researchers, doctors, whether we're janitors. We create knowledge together, musicians, artists, you name it. And that is the thing that is our shared humanity, right? That's the record of what makes us human. It's the record of what connects us despite our differences, our languages, our cultures, our religions, our backgrounds. And so, you know, if Wikipedia is the thing we do together, I'd like us to think a little bit more about how we do more things together. Because, you know, we're all in it here together.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you for your openness and amazing keynote. I really like it. So,
thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you very much. And all of you guys, I hope that you enjoy it. And thank you very much that you stayed with us for these 2 days, which were really like the adventure, what I can tell, for all our team. And hope to see you at our next event. Thank you very much. Bye. I get up, I get up, can't deny